Welcome back. Well, Dr. Phillips Okolo joins us next. He is a lecturer in Niger Delta University. He's also the pioneer and national publicity secretary of Society for Peace Studies and Practice. And he's also a former state CID official in Bayelsa State. Thank you for coming on this morning.
Thank you very much.
Well, unfortunately, lives are lost in these elections, which is what nobody wanted to happen. But then it turns out that in this election, or in any election, there always has to be a winner and a loser. You were there, you saw what happened. How did we get to that point wherein lives are lost?
It's rather unfortunate that in this day and time, elections that ought to be contested peacefully, elections that are amongst brothers, elections that are among these people from largely the same ethnic nationality. Because if it were to be in Lagos, or let's assume in states like Edo State, what would have happened? These are people who are all John-speaking people, and understandably too, are brothers. Why should the thing degenerate to this point? It's quite appalling. It's quite unthinkable. It's quite unbelievable. If I have graphic evidence to prove how people were killed, how people were maimed, I can tell you even authoritatively, 2 military men died a day, around Nekiremo. About 4 policemen died. And this is not too good. Remember, in NTI, I was saying, look, to what extent are the security prepared? But again, I can attest to the fact that the federal government, this time around, they actually tried in mobilizing security forces. But
and let's take it from there. I mean, you understand the terrain, but in terms of security and otherwise, what could they have done differently to ensure that at least lives, not to that magnitude, were lost?
Okay. If you say what could they have done differently, do we need to spend all of these used resources to conduct election in just 8 local government areas? Do we need to go extra miles in conducting election, like Mark said, election in just 8 local government areas for about how many days? So if we were to conduct election for a general election in Nigeria, what would have happened?
That's
now,
what we're asking. What should we do differently?
Having said that, and I think that there were some innovations in this, particularly the rerun, that we suggested also, arising from what we saw on the ground. Again, don't forget that there's largely usually no elections in Bayelsa, as it were. You know, there has never been proper voting processes. You know, but again, this time around, people began to see how, you know, elections are now being conducted. You know, but the point I'm making is that going forward, elections must be conducted properly, the way they ought to be conducted, or the way they did them now, even though there are problems. But the point, therefore, is that what may have happened would have been even worse, but because we suggested that accreditation be made simultaneously with voting processes. In other words, the voting and accreditation goes simultaneously.
Well, why was that suggestion made? What difference do you think it was going to make?
I was listening to the last speaker, and even the previous belong to either people or cards that may have been procured differently, because that's what happened. During the registration processes, you know, there are some people who migrate from different places to do this registration, and these cards find their way to politicians' hands.
About that particular perspective, we also did ask that question, and then they said, nope, that if you buy anybody's card, you can't use it because they have to be biometrics on the day of elections. If you scan your card, your biometrics should be done before you're then accredited.
No, I think, remember that there is also incident forms. So, for example, one of the analysts was talking about the fact that, for example, in Brass local government, okay, elections, according to him, 0% was allocated to PDP, and that it ought to have been also a strong area for even PDP, particularly on account that the Deputy Speaker of the House of Assembly, who is now a PDP member, is from that area also. And to that extent, according to him, there may have been more votes. But if that actually may be the truth. But again, in matching it with what you have said, or just opposing it with what you have said, you realize that perhaps if it is the way the PDP perhaps may be now reasoning, it may then be in line with what Jonathan Obobite spoke. You will then begin to appreciate or grapple with the fact that perhaps that may have occasioned them using such, votes. Allocating such votes without even, accreditation or using the card reader. So that's the scenario.
But I'm just also wondering now that look, this is just how many local government areas, and you have these amounts of people who unfortunately lost their lives. Does it matter how much security people are deployed to those areas? What about the conduct of politicians and how they encourage people to go around doing certain things because they want to win?
I thank you so much for this question. Do we need to deploy security? For example, 15,000 police officers. For example, a lot of gunboats. That means that if 15,000 police officers were deployed for only 8 local government elections, and then what number of Navy would have been deployed? What number of Air Force would have been deployed? Because, of course, we saw, fighter jets of whatever, small planes. Yeah, we saw, moving around Bayelsa throughout, yes. And that's why I said Nigeria may have expended so much of money.
But if you look at it, it's the peculiar nature of elections in Bayelsa, especially around southern Ijaw, which I thought by now we should be giving plus to the police, knowing full well that they also deployed area, their choppers were there hovering around. Still, we recorded some casualty. What if?
No, I get your point. The point here is that, yes, if we look at the deployment of the Nigerian police aerial aircrafts around the Niger Delta, then yet there were casualties. Yeah, I agree with you. But I think most of the problem lies in the voters themselves, or particularly the politicians themselves. But that's where I will commend the ordinary Bayelsa or the Bayelsa voters this time around, because in most of the places, they were firm. They were firm to the extent that they wanted to vote, and that people prevented them from voting all this while. And to that extent, they wanted to really cast their votes. And to that extent, going forward, you see, we can even suggest... That's
for the ordinary Bayelsan, which is a big plus. But the attitude, you say, of the politicians, let's talk more on that.
Yeah. In talking more about the attitude of politicians, for example, somebody mentioned names. I'm only being mindful. Otherwise, the attitude of some politicians, highly placed politicians, is unbecoming. And we have had people who are consistently, violent politically. In all elections they have contested, it is true violence. And remember, you recall, there was a time I came to this studio, okay, when you were at Maryland, and I talked about how a particular politician who is highly placed, and today even a serving minister, conducted himself in that election. I can tell you that in one of the elections, that same minister contested. And I was in Sagbama. My car was burnt. One of my car was burnt. Another of my car was vandalized. So what are we talking about? The point, therefore, is that there are people who are violent. For example, what happened in the APC primaries? This is to the glare of everybody. It was violent. The point, therefore, is that there are politicians that are violent.
Let me take you to electoral offenders. Because, I mean,